Hey, how's everybody doing? This is Evan Altman. I'm back. It's been a while since we've had one of these, and I apologize. I know a lot of you have been waiting patiently, or not waiting at all, and you're coming along. But anyway, figured the night of the deadline was a good time to get after it. I will be actually here probably in, I don't know, what time is it? It is, my clock still going? Oh, okay, it's not even 9 o'clock. That's wild. Is that right? Anyway. Be recording my another episode of Into the Basket, which is a podcast I do with Brad Robinson and Julie DeCaro, kind of recapping the trade deadline. So I figured I'd jump on, talk about the little here. I got the Cubs going on in the background. It's currently the bottom of the fifth in St. Louis, and so I'll try not to be too distracted. You'll notice I do not have any beer with me tonight, which is kind of weird. I was actually going to have one, but I don't have anything in the cooler that's really fit for kind of drinking on short notice. And and I've been trying to cut back a little bit. Kind of noticed been putting on a little poundage, and I'm going to have a few this weekend, so dialing it down. Anyway, let's get into it. First thing you probably noticed, this pretty sweet lid, and I don't know if you can see as I raise it up, it's a little bit harder to tell if I do it like that, but as you can see, so it's the Myrtle Beach Pelicans, the Cubs Advanced A team, which maybe a little bit familiar to most of you, I would assume. And so yeah, some pretty cool stuff. I was down there. I was actually in Myrtle Beach for one of the games earlier in the month, right? I think so. It was back on July 9th. Hung out a little bit. Got to sing the seventh inning stretch with them, and it was the second time I've been able to do that. So a lot of fun. What I really wanted. And I'm gonna pull this up. Excuse me for a moment. I'll be right back. I'm gonna grab my computer here. See if I can get this. It's on the old Twitters. I don't know if this will help very much. If I was smarter, I'd figure out a way to pop it up with a picture on here if I knew more what I was doing. But I don't, and maybe I'll get some suggestions as to how to do that. But what I want to show you here, if I can pull this up, is a picture, there we go, of the Palmetto State hat that they have. Kind of see that? It's super cool, and it's hard to tell from in here, but at the very bottom of the tree, the palmetto tree there, it actually makes an M. Myrtle Beach, so it's one of their alternatives. Super cool, right? That they actually, I'm trying to think if it was in June, they came out with these as kind of an alternate hat, and it immediately sold out of all of them. When I was there, the only sizes they had were 7, because they're fitted new era caps, size 7 and 6 3/4 and 6 1/2 or whatever. So I wear a 7 5/8. There's no way. And the minor league hats, in my experience, are sized slightly different from the major league hats in terms of if I get this 7 5/8, I don't know if you can tell, but it's a little bit on the big side. I used to be able to wear a 7 1/2, so maybe it's just the HGH I've been doing. My head grew, trying to be like Barry Bonds, and but the 7 5/8 is a little too big. It doesn't, it's not at all snug. But the 7 1/2 is it would give me a headache just to put it on. Whereas a major league hat, I could wear a 7 1/2, but it's and the 7 5/8 a little bit better. So it's really weird. And I've had some I have several. I think I have 3 or 4 Pelicans hats. I've got a Eugene Emeralds hat, and that one's huge. I could tuck my ears into it, 7 5/8. So it's a little bit weird. Anyway, so they did not have these Palmetto hats, and so I was talking to them about it, and I had tweeted something out recently just to kind of show this hat, and the Pelicans replied. They're like, "Oh, hey, we got it back in stock." So I'm like, "Cool." So I get on there and I'm checking it out, and I worked with the folks over there and I said, "Hey, how about this? Because the hats aren't cheap. Right, these fitteds are $36, and if you're ordering it from afar, you're paying $7-8 shipping for some of that stuff, and which is a little bit salty, right?" And I said, "Hey, is there any way I could get a discount code for folks? So if I could share that, because again, maybe some of us are super wealthy and that money doesn't matter, and even though I tend to be more experiential, hey, experiences are more important than material goods, although this is a material good, so that doesn't really fit. Anyway, I like having these things. I like supporting the minor league teams in particular, and this is a dope hat. Excuse me. So is that one. So anyway, so they got me a code, and so if you think this is cool, if you like that Palmetto one, any of the Pelican stuff in general, if you go in their store and use the code Pelicans Family 19, so Pelicans Family 19. I don't know if it's got to all be in caps, but you can try it that way. It gets you 30% off. So on a hat, that's $10.80 off, which essentially is going to get you, and I think shipping is like $7. So, which is kind of a lot, but if you look at 30% off, just even if all you did was buy a hat, $36, take off $10.80, so you're actually clearing out the shipping and getting another $3 off. So I feel like that's a pretty good deal. And I'm recording this on Wednesday night. I ordered my hat yesterday. It's going to be here tomorrow. So, if you think about that, like most of these things you go through and order this stuff, it takes a while to process. It takes them a few days to ship it. Like I ordered it. 15 minutes after I ordered it, I got the email that it had shipped, right? Because that's just going straight to their shop there in Myrtle Beach. They're packing it up, sending it out right there. So it's not like one of these MLB shops going through Fanatics and having to go all the way around. So anyway, I didn't mean to make that a long commercial for them. I'm not getting paid for any of that stuff, but the folks down there are awesome. They've always been super duper cool to me. And so I wanted to share that and just kind of put that out there, and hopefully, you guys can get some cool stuff too. So anyway, let's move on because, I have a couple things here, so I want to make sure I remember all this stuff, so I got my stuff for the day. So let's go trade deadline, right? Weird time. I don't want to get into all that sort of fed into that, but the deadline, having the single deadline, it was really strange, right? Because you would have thought it would have pushed a lot of things. I thought it would push things a little earlier, to be honest, that you would have teams that figured out, hey, we got to be sellers. We had heard early on, the Giants were going to sell. We're going to sell Farhan Zaidi. Their GM there really had assumed that he would come in there, kind of clean house, get rid of the guys like Madison Bumgarner and Will Smith and even Tony Watson, some of these others, and just, hey, let's get some prospects, let's get some picks, let's move on from this stuff, and let's start fresh, new leadership. But, and this is what it looked like they were going to do. Then they get hot, and they're like, oh man, we can compete. Except, at best, you're competing for a wild card with the Dodgers in there. And yes, you can win it out of the wild card, but if you're going to go all in and buy and hold on to everybody just to get to that one game, that doesn't really make sense. So anyway, so they start moving, but all these things, you have some of these studs like Zach Greinke gets traded, and Noah Syndergaard almost did, and Marcus Stroman, and you saw Trevor Bauer. So there's all these like ace type guys at the top that end up clogging all this stuff up. And we already saw a ton of extensions moving on throughout the early part of the season, right? So that's kind of like taking the place of free agency. There's this shift in the market, a lot of things going on. And where the Cubs were concerned, we saw them normally would be a big buyer and always have been in terms of relievers. But then we had the news come out. We saw this back in the winter, right? We saw them talk about how we don't have any more money left in the budget. Now, that's not saying we don't have money, that we're not making money. It's just that they have a baseball budget, and that's been allocated. Now, I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that's good. I'm saying that's what I'm saying. That's what they've told us, and it's true. They don't have an unlimited baseball budget. That's just the way it is, obviously. So we heard the same thing again, and in that Theo Epstein said this past weekend in Milwaukee that the signing of Craig Kimbrell used up most or all of the available capital that they had, or at least some of that flexibility that they normally build in for those midseason acquisitions. And so we saw them really make some cheap moves, right? The first one was to go get Derek Holland, who they didn't have to trade anybody for. They just picked him up on waivers for $1, basically, and not on waivers, but he's being designated, so they did a little acquisition there. And what it was, the Giants paid enough. So that I forget what his salary is, but the Giants paid enough of it so the Cubs only have to pay the prorated portion of the major league minimum. So they're paying him like $160,000 or something like that over the rest of the year. So that was a no-brainer. And the thing is, he's a lefty specialist, right? So they get him. Then they go out and they pick up David Phelps, who used to be much better when he was with the Yankees, really good. Underwent Tommy John surgery, missed all of 2018. He's only pitched, in a few games, like 13 games, I think, so far this season. So it's kind of hard to tell. Really bad whiff rate, which again, so the swinging strikes aren't there. his actual strikeout numbers aren't bad, but he's not generating a bunch of swings and misses. Like, not very many at all. So he's like way down to, sorry, I'm watching Chris Bryant kind of bat over here at the same time. So that was okay. Right. And they gave up Thomas Hatch there, and Hatch, third round pick from a couple years ago. I was at 2016 because they had gotten, or was it 17? Because they had gotten Fowler, or they had gotten him. Yeah, anyway. When they lost some picks because they signed qualifying agent or qualifying offer guys. And so he was a third round pick because they didn't have a first or a second. So he was their first pick in that draft. But he really hasn't developed into too much. They got Phelps in there. So that, again, kind of a guy who's ideally going to slot in there. Pedro Strope's on the IL right now. So Phelps slots in. Holland slots in. And then today, so we've been hearing all this time. So those are the moves we made like ahead of the deadline, right? And then Wednesday's kind of moving fairly slow. But we had heard, Brian ends up getting there. We had heard that they were shopping Martin Maldonado, which a lot of people thought was really weird. They're like, wait, didn't they just sign this guy? What's going on? Well, go back to the money, right? And it's not a lot. And here's what's really crazy. Like, a team like the Cubs should not be looking at it going, wait, so this dude makes $2.5 million over the whole year, and so his prorated, again, his portion for the remainder of the year, like 35% of the season is like not even $900,000. You're going to try to trade him to save money, but they are, and so what they were able to work out there with the Astros, and remember, Maldonado had been traded to the Astros last year because where was he? He was in Kansas City and then got traded to the Astros. Where was he? Anyway. For their stretch run, they really liked him there. Things worked out, but they couldn't bring him back and give him a starting job. He wanted a starting job, and actually, no, it was with he was with the Angels, and then got traded to the Astros, and he signed with the Royals. That's what it was. Signed with the Royals this year because they could guarantee him a starting job because Salvi Perez was hurt, like blew out his knee or whatever, and that was kind of a last minute thing. The Cubs have been pursuing Maldonado as a backup this winter, but clearly could not guarantee him regular innings and a starting role, and so he signed for $2.5 in KC. So the Cubs get him, and that was really more of an insurance move. Mike Montgomery wanted out. He didn't want to be there anymore. He wanted to start. He was pitching like crap, and that was kind of one of those things, right, where Montgomery said the right things publicly, but that began to grate on him and his, not pitching very well and having his role reduced. That didn't sit really well with him. So there were some things going on there. And he was a guy who, he wanted to start. He didn't go throwing desks around or anything like that, but he absolutely had made it very clear to the front office and to Joe Maddon what he felt his role was. And Mike Montgomery has a very high opinion of himself and his ability. So he was kind of moved, more like, hey, let's get on with this. And he didn't have a very good role. He couldn't be trusted because he couldn't get lefties out. And if you're a lefty who can't get lefties out, like at all, like a 1,500 OPS can't get lefties out. And so he moved on there. But then you've got a similar situation that Maldonado doesn't want to stick around if he can't get any innings. He hadn't played since Wilson Contreras came back because that was the other part of the deal. Contreras was on the IL. The Cubs said they knew it was minor and that he'd be coming back, but you never really know. So you get that insurance. And then it became one of those where Maldonado is not versatile. He can play catcher. That is it. He doesn't hit either. So when you have a team that's having trouble with offense and it likes to move guys around, carrying three catchers isn't really good. And we heard today that the Cubs never actually got close to moving any players from their 25-man Major League roster. So, Vic Caratini was not really a trade chip, or at least it doesn't sound like it. So, long story short, they were able to flip Maldonado over back to Houston, where he had a really good time there. And they picked up Tony Kemp, who was a guy who Houston had just designated. And he's a guy who's out of options, even though he doesn't hit arbitration until 2021. So this is kind of an interesting dynamic. Normally you think of guys who are not even heading into arbitration who have that. Usually you'd think they have a lot of options left. He does not. Again, based on how he's been used and his service time. So, again, he's controlled. I think he hits arbitration 2021. He's not a free agent until 24. Javi didn't get down. And so, not great that he doesn't have options because the Cubs can't really move him around a little bit, but primarily a second baseman, can play left field, can play center field, and so it gives him a lot more versatility. Big-time contact bat. doesn't swing and miss very often. So you're kind of looking at, I don't want to say Albert Almora. I mean, that's kind of but that's the easiest comparison. It's kind of a lazy one, but we can make that because he plays center, but he also plays second base. Well, they've optioned Addison Russell down. Robel Garcia is showing at this point that and this is who we thought he would be, and this is not a knock on him. He's just a big-time strikeout guy. He's being miscast in the leadoff role, and for whatever the hell reason Joe Madden continued to put him there, he's not there tonight, thank goodness. But he's not a leadoff hitter, and he's striking out 41% of the time now at a Golden Sombrero Tuesday night. So, again, and he served his purpose. He did a great job coming up. Awesome story from 5 years in Italy to coming into the majors. We've talked about him, I think, on here. I've talked about him on podcasts. I've mentioned him a lot. And he was never going to be the long-term solution, right? I never believed that. I don't think anybody did. But we're seeing him get exposed. He probably goes back down. Part of the other reason that's going to happen is because then the Cubs made the really big move of the day to get Nick Castellanos, which is another one. Sorry, and I apologize because I'm going to keep looking at the game, so I'm not looking right in the eye. But Castellanos is another one who they've been after for a long time. I've been a big fan of here, just looking at what he can do with this roster in terms of how he hits left-handed pitching. And the numbers have dipped a little bit post All-Star break just because they've been creeping up so high. So if you look at his season numbers, not super great because he doesn't hit righties really, really well. He hits lefties very well. And so those things are going to balance out. I got to keep this up so I can make sure I look at all the right things here, right? Oh, yeah, there's the other one. That's the other one we got to talk about. Happ just swings at a high fastball. And so the thing with Castellanos, he's kind of a butcher out there on defense, and so you'll put up with that, though, if he's deployed the right way. So if he gets to play a bunch against lefties, and he still hits righties moderately well, so you just have to balance that lineup. So he's going to have to come at the expense of someone which we assume will maybe, ooh, there's Happer. There's a hit. And so there's a run. All right. So we assume that's probably going to be Garcia. I can't imagine they would send Happ back down this quickly, even though that is a little bit. But with Kemp there at second base, again, you've kind of filled that role. So we'll see. But what I really like about that, so there's some kind of cool stuff around it, right? They said that the trade got finalized within 40 seconds of the 4 p.m. Eastern time deadline. 40 seconds, because it was up against it, right? And we're all tracking it, and you're seeing a lot of this stuff comes through, like the reports come through after 4 o'clock, right? So it's coming up to 4 o'clock, and like Bruce Levine tweeted out that the Cubs had a deal in place to get him for the Double-A catcher Johnny Pereda, and I'm like, and they didn't make that happen. What in the hell is wrong with them? That's insanely stupid. Why wouldn't they do that if they had it? Were they appealing? What happened? They appeal? Is he out? What? Trying to figure out what's going on in the Cubs game. So some really weird stuff here, and so as it's happening, right, it's pushing on toward 4. The the Tigers had they're out in Anaheim. They had a 4:07 p.m. start time. Right, so you're looking at, and Castellanos is in the starting lineup, which is kind of weird that they would even have him in the lineup at all, just given everything that was going on and knowing that he was going to be traded. That seemed kind of strange. But then it comes up and it's already a little bit after 4, and you're like, holy crap, the Cubs didn't make this work, because everybody else, the Indians were in on him. They made trades, got Yasiel Puig. Who else? The Rays, I think we're talking to. They made some moves. The Phillies had been, I think, in on it, and they got Chris Dickerson. So all these other teams, every other team that was involved dropped out by then. So you're like, okay, it's up to the Cubs, and that's it. And so, they were working frantically, and all this stuff had fallen out. And then it's like, then you hear, oh, he's actually been scratched from the lineup. Like, last second was scratched. Because, again, they're the visiting team, so they're batting first. Not that he couldn't have left the game in the middle of it, but still. So it gets done, 40 seconds, gets figured out. And so what it ended up being was that, again, and he has like it's like a $9.95 million contract. So, I think it's something in the neighborhood of like 3.4 million-ish that he's owed for the remainder of the season. And this is the best part, right? Because like the Cubs aren't even willing to take that. Like that was too much for them. And so I think the deal probably went down something like it could have been for Pereda, and that would have been it, but the Cubs would have had to assume the entire salary. And so they kind of haggled back and forth, and so the Tigers ended up kicking in $500,000 of it. So the Cubs are down to like 2.7, 2.8, maybe somewhere in there. But they had to part with Alex Lang and Paul Richan. Now, Lang had looked really bad at Myrtle Beach to start, and it was a little bit of a surprise that he started out at Myrtle Beach this year. You know, people thought, hey, this is a first-round pick from a couple years ago. Here's a guy who we really want to push, get developed. Started out really slow, but then they started to see some things in him, and he ended up getting promoted, did a lot better at Double-A. The numbers were starting to look really good. And then Richan is a guy who, again, not really up on too many people's radars. I think he's like the Cubs' 23rd rated prospect, which is, pretty good in an organization, but 23rd in an organization that isn't rated very highly out of 30 teams, so do the math. But he's there at High A Myrtle Beach, or was. And something like, 86 strikeouts to 84 strikeouts, 86 strikeouts, like 16 walks, something like that. So big strikeout to walk ratio. Knows how to pitch pretty well, goes with that high strike, not major velocity, anything like that. I got to see him pitch at the game that I was at here, and definitely looks pretty good. So pretty good haul, but neither of those guys was going to impact the Cubs in the next 2 seasons, right? And so they needed to make this move now. You get a guy who really smooths out and lengthens that lineup, gives them a lot more power, a lot more, I shouldn't say power so much, but productivity against left-handed pitchers. And the real key is this. So here's the thing that I've been looking at that I really like. The Cubs, and I know we talk about how poorly they hit with runners in scoring position, right? And it is true. They're not very good with runners in scoring position, but the real key to the whole thing is that they don't get many runners in scoring position to begin with. Now, I haven't run the numbers in a couple weeks, but the last time I looked at them, they were somewhere in the neighborhood of, it was like 8.5 or 9 plate appearances per game with runners in scoring position. So you think, okay, well, that's not bad. Well, when you look at when they won the World Series, they were somewhere around 11 or 12. So you're looking at a difference of about 2 plate appearances per game without a runner in scoring position. Their production was actually better this season, at least at the point that I looked at it, and I think it's roughly the same than what it was in any previous season. So they were actually hitting better with the runners. They've never been very good at it, so it's a low bar, but they were having fewer opportunities. And so if you look at 2 opportunities per game, well, in the space of a game, 2 plate appearances, not a big deal. But in the space of a series, now you're talking 6 plate appearances. In a week, you're talking, 12 to 14. In a month, in a year, so you start extrapolating that, and you're thinking, man, that's a few more runs. Even if you're only batting 250, that's a couple more hits. That's a couple more runs. That's several more. That's a couple more wins over the course of a week or a month or whatever. So when you have a guy in Castellanos, here's the deal. 37 doubles. Leads the majors in doubles. So right there, you're talking about Kyle Schwarber popping it up. You're talking about a guy who's not only, when he gets the hits, he's already in scoring position because he's got all the doubles, right? That's awesome. So gap-to-gap power, excellent stuff there. Should play really well at Wrigley with those nice, Wrigley's got some tasty power alleys, right? So this guy could actually turn some of those into home runs more frequently, but probably going to put a lot of balls in the ivy. That's really a nice thing that we're going to see. So he's already putting himself in scoring position immediately. And with that double, even if the guy is only on first, you talk about getting that runner home. Or again, runners on second, talking about a guy who can easily get them home. So really fits well with what we're talking about. I know a lot of people like the defense, and that's one of the things that we weren't seeing from this team that we did see in 16. But, you'll take that at the expense of getting a lot more hits. So I like that one. The last move they made, actually, they did make another one. So what's his name? Oh, yeah, Jimmy Herron. So speaking of the Pelicans, right? Man, the Pelicans are involved in all kinds of moves today. Jimmy Herron, outfielder for the Pelicans, was the Cubs' 3rd-round pick a couple years ago. So I think he was like 90th, 98th overall, something like that. Fairly highly thought of. Really hasn't put it together very well. Good contact skills, not a great average, not really doing much. So they moved him to the Rockies for international money. Kind of a strange move. But the other one that was kind of big that really flew under the radar just based on all the other stuff that was going on is the Cubs moved Carl Edwards Jr., who, was just that guy for, the last 4 or 5 years, who, when he was first coming up, was thought of as maybe a starter prospect, kept getting hurt, they moved in the bullpen, he's come up and has been that dude who you thought could really be the next guy for a while, but he could just never put it together. Really had struggles, just psychologically. I think there was a lot going on there. Physically was never really a problem, but mentally he just seemed to have this block a lot of times where he just could not put it together. The stuff is there. Saw the issues this year with the delivery. That got him thrown off. So you really hope, they traded him out to the Padres. You really hope that he can put it together out there. The change of scenery will do him well. And I think it will. I think being in a lower pressure environment out there, I think suits him really, really well. And I do think kind of that, just that laid back SoCal vibe, right? I don't want to be too stereotypical about it, but I do think that's going to treat him really well. South Carolina kid, kind of a country boy, but I do think that being out of that Chicago pressure and kind of getting out of the expectations that he faced with the Cubs is going to be a good thing for him. Now, the guy that got back for him, now this is going to be an interesting one, and I don't know. Honestly, I've never even heard of the guy before, which is really kind of weird. But Brad Wieck, I think it's Wick. I don't want to call him Wick because they've got Rowan Wick, and then if you had Wick, and then it'd be really weird. But Weak sounds bad because it's like you don't want to be weak. But this dude could be interesting, and I think this is one of those where you've got this mutual kind of a thing where both of them could be big time change of scenery candidates, right? So 6'9", woo, that was right up in Goldie's face. 6'9" southpaw, that's pretty cool, right? Gets that big time downward plane, get a lot of tilt on that fastball. Looked really good. So he's a fastball slider guy, mid 90s, probably sits about 93, touch a little bit higher. 27 years old, so he's had some experience last year and this year with the Padres, but it didn't stick because he had an ERA somewhere north of 6. And the issue there, it was also north of 6 in AAA this year. It's like 6.11, somewhere in that neighborhood, which is not good, obviously. But a couple things to look at. So first we look at it, and I like, so the thing the Cubs have struggled with for the longest time in terms of their pitching, in terms of their bullpen guys, right? This guy's a reliever. That's the other thing is over a short sample. I think it was like 40 innings. So that's still pretty solid for a reliever, 30, 40 innings. But, either way, small samples can kind of hurt that for a reliever that can come down pretty quickly. But big time strikeout to walk ratio, something like 40 strikeouts. What did I say? Like, he's got like 34 strikeouts in 17 minor league innings to like 6 walks. And he's over a strikeout per inning in the bigs. Not many walks there either. But he's given up a ton of home runs, largely because his slider is just completely flattened out. Like, the slider doesn't look good at all. I mean, it looks like garbage. So, again, when you're a fastball slider pitcher and the slider doesn't work, that's not going to be really good. It just a lot of cement mixers. So, you kind of wonder, though, had some issues, got sort of a slow start to his season this year. He actually underwent testicular cancer surgery. So, you sort of wonder how much, in addition to just physical stuff that's going on with that, psychologically, right? I mean, not just the surgery, but just having a cancer scare, that's going to impact guys differently. And so you sort of, again, you wonder in the same direction. Now, this guy's coming into maybe a higher pressure situation, although, he's in AAA, so that's not a very big deal right now. And so pitching for Iowa, can you kind of get that back together? But you think, you get a lefty, solid mid-90s velocity, a lot of strikeout ability, and a strike thrower. Now he's got to learn how to throw those strikes correctly. He's got to shape that slider a little bit better and get that going. But that's the kind of dude that could really help you out, could be a real asset in the future. So I think that worked out really well for them. All in all, like what they've done. I don't have a lot of faith in Derek Holland overall as a pitcher, but he's done a really good job of getting out lefties. So as long as Joe Maddon can deploy him properly, and the Cubs do kind of keep the reins on. I'm not going to get into the whole thing with Maddon talking about how dumb the fans are and not understanding the bullpen. That's fine, right? Don't want to expose myself as one of the fans with the cockamamie ideas. Yeah. But they look stronger, sharper. There's a hit. Darn it. And so you hope that'll play out, right? The little tweaks and changes here and there. But I really, really think Castellanos is someone who tightens up that lineup significantly, who really helps him out. Now, I don't know if he'll bat 2. I'd kind of like to see him there. I like tonight's lineup. This is Wednesday night. Finally, I've been asking, I've been saying, hey, put Hayward at leadoff against right-handed pitchers and put Wilson Contreras at leadoff against left-handed pitchers. Simple as that. Let's do that. We saw Wilson Contreras up there a few games ago, and then we saw Garcia for 3 games, and now we see Hayward tonight. So it's Hayward, Contreras, Bryant, Rizzo, Baez. Now I'd like to see that, except you take Contreras, maybe move him down, and again, it'll go a little bit differently, kind of depending on who's in there. Or if Wilson's not in there, so let's say, if it's a lefty, he probably will be and should be in there. But maybe you don't have Hayward in there, right? Maybe Castellanos plays out and right, and you have Almora, I don't know, whatever the case may be. And so you fit in and then go whoever's up front, right? What I say, Wilson Contreras is batting number one, and then Castellanos, and then Bryant, and Rizzo, and Baez, and then you put whomever in there. But that fits out. Maybe he drops down to 5, whatever the case may be. But that's a guy who, I don't think you want him to be your run producer necessarily, but being able to get himself into scoring position, get that thing moving, put that pitcher at odds right away. Really good stuff. Really hope the best for Carl Edwards Jr. I really hope that does play out well for him. Pickoff didn't work. In getting out there to San Diego, I think it will. Kemp is, I don't know. It gives him some versatility. I do like, hey, if you're not going to have a guy, on the one hand, they tried with Garcia, and there's a ton of thunder from both sides, but you also have that boom-bust thing. I think the thing with Kemp is that the ceiling is much, much lower than what it is with Garcia, but the floor is higher. And so if you can do that and you get a contact guy and you can make some of that stuff work, then I think that does help them in the long run. So the Cubs got better. They absolutely got better at the deadline. Like that, I don't think we can deny. And hopefully they continue to do that, because the whole improvement from within thing, like that wasn't working. It's still a little bit bothersome that they had to do what they did based on budgetary stuff, and that that Ricketts essentially had to okay a little bit of an extra expenditure on Castellanos. When again, we're talking about like $2.5-3 million. Like that's a little bit like, come on, dude. Like it's too late. Somebody I think on Twitter said, you're pot committed now. Like, what's the point? You're already in for how much? What's $2 million? But again, it's not my money, and it's easier to spend somebody else's. So, I'll close it out. I already went longer than I wanted to because of the other stuff. But definitely, so check out the Pelicans stuff. Again, Pelicans Family 19. Pelicans Family 19 for 30% off. And they ship that stuff out quick. And again, I can't say enough awesome things about the people down there. If you get the chance to get down to Myrtle Beach, whether you're going there on vacation, you got a family thing going on, get to the ballpark there. Go see some games there. The people are phenomenal. Everybody from the front office to, there we go, got Goldie, or was that was O'Neill. The front office folks, the usher, I mean, everybody there. The food is fantastic. They got a really good beer selection. I mean, it's an awesome place. So cannot recommend it enough. But again, order the hat. 2 days later, I'm going to get it. So hopefully it gets here before I leave. My son and I are going to see, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Dude Perfect. If you're watching this on YouTube, you might. But they are actually doing a tour, touring road show. And so we have tickets to see that. I got those for my son is a huge fan. I turned him on to them a couple years ago and just showed him, some of these trick shots. And so he is like all about it. And then we got the email. So they have a VIP meet and greet deal beforehand. So we're going to go do that. And he's just like beside himself. And tomorrow's their first day of school. Right? So August 1st, they're back at school. Which is actually a couple days later than what they have been going. They've been going back in July the last few years. So kids are back at school as of tomorrow. So that's going to be kind of his first day of school thing. So really excited about that. Thanks for joining me here. Though, check out Into the Basket. So if you go search that on Apple Podcasts, or if you just type in Into the Basket 670 The Score, Into the Basket podcast, you can find it. It is hosted by 670 The Score, which is a pretty cool deal. And we're really excited about it. We're just having fun with it. And really cool little deal that we got going on. So thank you for checking that out, if you would. And then, go check out Cubs Insider, see what we've got going on there. Tons of other podcasts that we sponsor or host or whatever. So a lot of different things going on. Again, this is my little web series. I don't know how frequently. I should do it more frequently because it is kind of fun to talk to you guys. And normally I have a beer with me. I've got a bunch of them sitting over here, but either they're not cold or, as I said, I'm trying to get rid of a little bit of that. I'm 40, man. I'm too old to keep packing that stuff away. So thanks again. Have a great night, and we'll see you next time.